Thanks, David. I'm just going to trust that he said really nice things about me then. Thank you for inviting me back here again after the last couple of years. I'm going to change the tone up this afternoon. We have heard a lot about the science behind colon hydrotherapy and how our body works, and particularly our digestive system. I feel so nervous right now, my heart's going to pump out of my mouth. But what I would like to do is share with you some of my journey doing colon hydrotherapy, not so much the physical aspect, but the emotional and spiritual journey that I've been on with this. In my learning, it was, you know, the vagus nerve is so important, and our microbe and what we're actually getting now and the knowledge we have with that now is huge. When I first started this in 2005, so not long ago, but long enough ago, we didn't have that information. And I came into this work from 20 years in social work, psychotherapy. So when I learnt colon hydrotherapy, it's interesting about how people talk about, you know, what that therapy is. And no matter who I spoke to, they would have a different meaning for me. And no matter what teacher you went to, they had the right type of therapy. You know, we're all taught the right therapy. And then when we actually learn this therapy, we might have been taught our therapy in our clinic, we might do that as a standalone therapy. We might do that as part of our alternate services, therapies. We might do it as a mainstream medical therapy. So it changes depending on where we're learnt and how we were actually taught, and about how then we express that in our clinic. When I look at the different approaches around the world, being in Australia right down there, we get to see what's going on in the rest of the world a little bit more. So when we look to the United States for information, we see that it's become, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems it's quite constricted in the States. They have quite formal protocols that they have to go through to do their colon hydrotherapy. In Europe, it seems it's quite a medical type approach here, and it's okay with that, you know, that's understood, that's part of the process. In the UK, it's more of a naturopathic, so they do a lot more with herbs and infusions and as part of their naturopathic process. In Australia, we get to look at all of that and choose, okay, well, what parts do we want? And we've all been trained from different people around the world, obviously. It's interesting, and for me, when we first started, what colonics used to look like, and the way that I was originally taught it was a gravity method. It was a tank on the wall with some hosing and speculums I had to clean out and sterilise and then use again. And that's how I was taught in 2005. And that was the right way if you spoke to my teacher. I was also learnt by correspondence. I in fact didn't go to a clinic only just for 2 days, and I assisted in one colonic. And then I was left to my own devices. Not only was I left to my own devices, because I didn't want to do the thing on the wall and do the reusable, I bought a device and I bought disposables, but I didn't know how to use it. So I had to get my daughter in so I could practice on her so that I knew what I was doing when the clients come in. The things that we get our kids to do, hey? She was like 18 or 20 or something. It's okay, she was a little. So for me, learning this, though, it stepped me in the part where I stepped into my psychotherapy background. So I started to see people on the table that were coming with trauma. And it was actually the person that I was working with and that I was interested about as much as actually doing the colon therapy. Now, don't get me wrong, when I first started doing colonics, and the reason I got into that is that I had a serious colon issue. I just didn't poo. I just didn't, once a month maybe. In fact, when I first started to have them, the colon therapist that I would have the sessions from, she was ready to hospitalise me, thinking that I had a structural issue. But then the heavens opened up, and we know how those stories go. But then it was like I come out of that, and this is where my interest came, because I come out of that session and there was a shift in me. There was a change, and I went, what is going on here? And it was the clarity. It was the emotional cleansing that I couldn't put words to, but I knew that that change had happened. And you would see that in the clinic all the time with people. But it's about actually getting the words around this, because this is the unseen world that we're working with. I also knew, because I come off a farm, that really inside of us, we're not much different than Mother Earth. So if we look at Mother Earth and we think about the rivers around Mother Earth, we've got veins within us, and they're like rivers. We've got blood cells in there, and they're like little pebbles. And we've got microbes and all the other little bits and pieces and the plasma and everything that's going on in our body. So I started to really see that when I was working with someone that was in trauma, because a lot of people were coming, and trauma doesn't mean, you know, you've been in a big explosion or something very serious. Trauma can be small events over a long period of time. And trauma is relative. You know, what is trauma for me might not be trauma for you. So, but then how that actually responds in our body, and how we actually are carrying that in our body through cellular memory, to me that's interesting. And it was that first session that I had. It was a couple of sessions, because we had to get the heavens to open up. But there was something innately in me that kept me going back to, and that was traumatic. That was actually painful for me. And I remember thinking, if I ever do this therapy, which I want to do, it's never going to be that painful. So I went to a colon therapist, the ones that have them in the laundry, and they just fill you up so it's coming out my eyeballs and then make it all come away again, you know? So that, I think, was fairly normal in practices. In Australia anyway, I'm not sure about elsewhere in that time ago. But thinking about how our body operates, and then how Mother Earth operates. I come off of property, I come off a farm, I'm a greenie, I'm a tree hugger. So having that as a parallel made sense to me. Because our body needs minerals, it needs moisture, it needs mulch, and it needs microbe. That's exactly what Mother Earth needs. Same things. They say that the salt in the ocean is the same salinity as our blood. Yeah, we've got as many minerals in our body as what we have in the earth. So I have this whole thing about what is within is without. So what we want to do is get this body working with a flow, like Mother Earth. I'm not going to go through it now, but I know when I started working with Aboriginal people, so my life, when I first started colon hydrotherapy, I set up in the middle of a bush, in the middle of Queensland, which is in Australia, up the top, in the hot part, an hour from anywhere. I had no water, I had no electricity, and I was doing colon hydrotherapy. I had 2 sheds. What was I thinking? I was by myself. I have no idea what I was thinking. But I was guided there, and I was coming out of having nervous breakdowns, etc., from social work. So it was a place of healing for me. But this is where I also linked in very heavily with the Aboriginal people of our country. So while I grew up with our Aboriginal family, I didn't, take ownership of that until I went onto this property. And they, in fact, gave me a blessing when I went to that property, and my farm then was called Bungaroo, which means turtle. But it was here that I also started to speak with our Aboriginal people about how they see the world operates, and some of the dreaming around that. I was speaking to an Aboriginal elder, a lady, and we have a lot of our traditional owners around the world have an obesity problem because of white man's food. And I spoke to her about the issue of her, she's not fat, she's inflamed is what I would say. Your cells are all clamped up like little pebbles in the river. And they're all squashed together, like these ones over here. They're all squashed together, so they can't make you healthy. So I went on this whole journey with her about that. And you know, she got it. She stopped drinking Coke and eating sugar on that day and started having colonics with us. So it's about making that story and that work, but it's then again going, what else has this therapy got to offer that isn't written in science? What is it that we're actually affecting here? What change are we affecting in this unseen world? So today, I call it water medicine. So really today I want to share my journey with you over the last 15 years. And as I said, not really my physical healing, but my emotional and my spiritual journey that I've been on. And to do that, I'm going to draw on the work of Dr. Batman Magalji, Dr. Masaru Emoto, and our Aboriginal people. And I'm sure you know both of those and have looked at their work a lot. But I think it's sometimes good to put it into a different context about what they're saying and how that fits in the colonic room, and then how that actually impacts our session that we end up doing with our client, and bringing them all together. So as part of my spiritual connection at the same time of learning this therapy and moving out of social work, forget that. So when we talk about our Aboriginal people and water, we think about our rainbow serpent. Let me go back a little bit. When Aboriginal people talk about water, it's life force. We know that. We're actually made in water when we're a fetus. Our life is surrounded by water. And they talk about water and they say that water creates us, it sustains us, and nothing survives without water. Water is the life force for us all. And they say if we're going to lose that, I don't know where we're going to stand. If that water go away, everything will die. That's the power of water. He connect the land. The Dreamy, by Army, he put them all together. So if we take that information and go over to Dr. Batman Magalji, he says that within us, water binds us together. It's like a sticky rice that holds us together. So again, we have this outside and inside world going on here in the way that my weird mind works. So in our Aboriginal culture, we have our rainbow serpent, and he represents a very powerful source. And he's actually a beautiful story, and he travels throughout our country, and depending on which Aboriginal dreaming that you're speaking of, we have hundreds of them actually in our country. They will give you a bit of a different idea, but the rainbow serpent is a water protector. He travels around the water holes and he travels in the storm clouds. He has the power to perish or thrive. That's his job, and we must respect the rainbow serpent, which means we must respect the water, which is a message that we need to be hearing as humans walking on this land. So for our Aboriginal people, when they're actually entering a water area, a water hole, they in fact have to go through rituals to get to that water hole. So they will yell out in advance to tell the water, the rainbow serpent, they're coming. They're coming to this water hole to have a drink or to wash or to collect. They rub dirt on them so that the rainbow serpent can smell and know that they are a part of that country, because they're very clear about their boundaries of their countries. And then they yell out. And once they've done those rituals, then they can go then to that water hole and drink or take the water, whatever they need to do. And they know that they're going to be protected in that, and that so are their family. I find this interesting because when I do colonics, when we go into a person, I always have an intention and I ask for permission before I go to that person's belly. So we always make the space sacred in the clinic room. But when they're lying on the bed, before I touch their belly, I will actually ask either out loud or under my voice, but typically out loud, may I put my hand on your belly? May I come into your sacred water hole? And I set the intention with the client so they know. And what we're actually doing is we're calming the vagus nerve. Yeah? And then the next thing we do is we're asking them to breathe. So we put their hand on the belly and we're asking them to breathe in. So again, we're calming that vagal, we're bringing them into their body, sometimes for the first time ever. People don't breathe into their belly. You find how hard that is? Like you get someone to breathe and they're breathing into their chest really easily, and you say, no, push my hand up and down. Put your breath here. They find that very difficult. So while the Aboriginal people ask for permission to go to waterholes, I ask for permission in our clinics, and I teach this, we ask for permission to go to this waterhole, to this sacred area. What's actually interesting about this sacred area is that in Ayurvedic medicine, we know that it's called a Nabi Mama. And our navel, we have 72,000 points that meet at the navel. Subtle energy nerves that connect and also site where 12 types of prana vital forces, present. It's where muscles, arteries, veins, nerves, ligaments and joints converge. That's insane to me. Like, can you even wrap your head around that? I can't. But I know it because I can feel it. And you know what people are like with their belly button, and when you're asking, can you put your hand on their belly, and if you go in, and in some of my more in-depth work, I put my fingers into their belly button. And that's like quite an intimate process. But gosh, it's powerful. So the Nabi Mama controls what are they saying there? It's our sacral chakra. It governs the small intestine. It circulates the energy in the entire body. And if we're looking at the small intestine, we know that from all of the science that you've actually had, this sort of can you see how this can layer on top? And it can actually give you a whole new other area about how you're actually working with this person. If you so wanted to see this as a therapeutic process, not just a physical process. And it governs the metabolism. It strengthens through the main point. Stimulation aims at Ayurvedic. They feel the pulse. You know, you go into your belly button and you'll actually feel the pulse within your belly button, and that will actually determine your vagal tone. So if you're actually putting your finger, any finger, typically your big finger, into your belly button, if you can't feel a pulse, you've got a very slow vagal tone. So you want to be able to feel that pulse in the belly button. One of the things that in our Aboriginal culture, they talk about aliens. And they say that the aliens come in the body from the universe. And they take this person over, and it's like bad spirits. In talking to my elders, though, what we actually determine is in fact parasites. And I know that some of you, we had a presentation this morning on some parasites in there. Parasites are amazing, and I want to talk a little bit more about that at the end of this session as a sideline, because we've done some good work around that. But again, it's about cleaning up these rivers of life. It's about making space for clarity and connection to occur. So again, we've got our blood system that looks like Mother Earth, but we want to have the flow going on there. It's about the fluid, it's about the cells, it's about the plasma. Some people call it the love plasma. You know, it's what connects us together. It's actually said that 40 tons of water comes from the universe each year. And we see that in dew, the morning dew. You know, when you get on the grass and so our old people, I've been out bush with them to learn bush medicine with our old people, and we get up early and we will rub the dew all over our body. Their belief is that we're actually bringing in the universal intelligence with that water. And if we listen and we talk a little bit later with Emoto, water carries information. It's a conduit for information. So to me, that makes sense. I don't necessarily understand it all 100%, but it makes sense. There's a knowing with that. So if we look at colon hydrotherapy and look at what we're doing, and if we take in some shamanic principles around the world, we know that with shamanic medicine, there's 4 principles and 4 elements that they bring in. So they bring in the air, they bring in the earth, they bring in the water, and they bring in the fire. And this is for Indigenous cultures across the world. And for a person to be well, we have to have all of those elements balanced, right? They all have to be there, and we have to acknowledge them all. And I find it quite interesting that in a colonic, in a therapeutic colonic, we're bringing in all of these. So air, as the important part of getting someone to come in and asking for permission to come into their belly, into their waterhole, their sacred area, we also now are getting them to breathe. So we're bringing in the element of air, and we're asking them to breathe into their belly. We're bringing in the element of air, earth through our base chakra. We know it's connected to earth. And we're getting people to sink down into that, if you know what I mean. Obviously water, but it begs the question, doesn't it? Like if we're bringing water in, what is the vibration of the water that we're using? And what is the quality of the water that we're using? What filter systems do we have? We actually put crystals in our filters so that we're actually changing that vibration up. And then our fire. We talk about in Ayurvedic, they actually talk about we've got too much fire in the brain and not enough in the belly. And a part of actually cleansing, what we're doing is we're bringing this fire back to our hara, to our center. So we're bringing in these 4 elements of shamanic practices, whether we're sort of thinking about it or not. I guess what we're doing is we're doing it consciously in the way that I teach. I'm asking people, the therapists, when they're going in, these are the 4 constructs that they're thinking about. Because it opens up your session. It opens up where you can go. Today I'm going to look a little bit more at water because colon hydrotherapy, that's what we do. So if we look at Dr. Batman McGalgi, you all would have read his book maybe a couple of times. He's got a huge amount of YouTubes, and it's really just worthwhile sometimes going back to hear what he's got to say. Because if we listen to him, really we're chronically dehydrated. And as we have lifestyle disease progressing and getting larger and larger, it's like, how do we deal with this chronic dehydration? Because drinking water just doesn't cut it. So he talks about that there's 4 fundamental untruths in our society, and that the medical system have picked up and they see them as truths. He believes they're not a truth. He talks about that the dry mouth is a sign of dehydration. So if you start to feel dry in the mouth, then you're dehydrated. He would argue that you're past dehydration at that stage, and your body rarely will actually say that you've got a dry mouth or dehydrated because you're making saliva all the time to live. When we eat, we make saliva. So that's not 100% true as a good example of being dehydrated. Our mainstream talks about the water has no direct metabolic role in the body. And he would say without water, there's no metabolic function in the body. We must have water for metabolic function. That water intake regulates mechanisms of the body are efficient throughout life, that as we age, we don't need as much water. And I'll show a slide in a minute, and we do need as much water. It's just that our body starts to tell us we're not thirsty because it gets sick of telling us that we need to have a drink. And all of you in there yawning now, go and get your drink of water and guzzle down because you need a drink of water. That we think that all fluids can replace water, and that's not correct. If you're drinking caffeine, if you're drinking natural aspartame, diet drinks, you need alcohol. You actually need to double your water. That's not fluid. Water's water. You just want to have good quality water. You don't want to have it full of chlorine because we know we put chlorine in the pool. And why do we put it in the pool? Because it kills everything. And I don't know about in Europe. Do you guys have chlorine in your water? Yes? No? Yes? Yeah, so chlorine kills everything. So if you're drinking the water out of the tap, then you're actually killing all of your microbe within your body. And we sort of forget that. And if we're doing colonics and we haven't filtered, then we're actually killing stuff as we're having a colon session, as opposed to helping. It's just a good thing to remember and have a mindfulness about. In fact, he goes on to say, Dr. Batman-Magaldi goes on to say that water has life-giving effect in the body, that water is a source of energy, that bones are a primary source of energy, and dehydration will unlock the energy which allows calcium to be released into the body. So again, another reason why we have calcium deficiency. We know that calcium is an issue when our body is too acidic because our body draws in that extra calcium to try and alkalize us. And now if we're dehydrated, it's unlocking the storage channels from within our bones. So now we're going to, again, have an issue with osteoporosis, for example. It's not the calcium. It's not that we need to drink milk. We need to drink water. So water has life-supporting properties. It's a solvent and it's a packing material. It's a transporter. Water becomes sticky like rice, as I said before, and it stops things dispersing around the body. It keeps things intact, much like our dew that's carrying information from one universe to the other. Dr. Batman-Magaldi again talks about two oceans of water. We have one on the inside of the cell and one on the outside. So when we're actually born, they are in balance. We have the same amount of liquid within the cell as what we've got outside the cell. But by the time we age and we pass, we've got half and less. And that's why we shrink and we get bent over. It's because of dehydration. Water is also as the best natural histamine. It's a drought regulator, so it keeps the body functioning. However, we've got a whole heap of medications that have antihistamines in them. So we're down-regulating that neurotransmitter all the time. So again, it's about where do we start to deal with this problem? Are we looking at those symptoms, or are we actually going in and thinking, what is the cause? Again, he would say that we're chronically dehydrated. So we know the scientific need for water is known. Whether we all agree on this in the mainstream is a different story. The pharmaceutical company isn't going to make quite as much money if the doctors start telling people you're not sick, you're thirsty, go home and drink 2 litres of water. They're not going to quite get the same amount of returns for their shareholders. So I think our job, though, in colon hydrotherapy is that we're giving the body a drink through this colon session. I'm going to talk more about that, but teaching your people how to drink water. I, in fact, had a triathlete and she didn't drink water, and chronically badly she didn't drink water. This was before we had the modern technology of phones and stuff. I would get my reception to call her every hour to tell her to have a glass of water, to teach her to drink again, because she really had no desire whatsoever to drink water. So teach your people a cup every hour, but don't sip. You know, if you just keep sipping, you're not going to get hydrated. You need to drink half a litre, drink a litre. Let your body flush that out, take up what it needs and get rid of the rest. We know that by giving a person a colonic, we're allowing the body and a slow release. So we talk about a slow fill with a colonic. The way that we do the sessions, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but we do this in a way of slow release, so of always keeping water in the colon. We never empty it out completely. So how I was originally taught was you fill up and then you release out, you know, fill up and release out. We actually slowly fill, but we even slower release. So the water, there's never not any water in the colon. This is allowing that water to absorb through not just the mesenteric system, but our epithelial layers, through our lymphatic system. We really want to get that in there and plump up those little blood cells. Water, when we put water into the body, I feel like it's when the body can form alchemy. It's like doing its magic, because it's not just about getting rid of the waste. It's actually about what energy it's giving, what vital force energy is it giving to the rest of your body, into your organs. And it's converting that, and it's also converting the information. So for me, colonics is as much, if not more, about hydration than what it is about elimination. When we think of water, and you would have all seen this slide many times, I imagine, Dr. Emoto and Ikari. Have you all seen it? It's regular, yeah? Yeah. So he took, around the world and taking pictures of frozen water crystals. It's a welcome reminder again what we're actually doing and what substance we're using within the colonic. What magic it is, and just your intention, your hand on that person's belly, your intention in that room is going to actually change that water that's going into that person. Like, can you see that? Do you get what I'm saying with that? Or do you think I'm just talking rubbish? I'll keep going. It's like we can see, imagine we've got someone on the table and they have come with a huge amount of trauma. Or just trauma. There's just trauma in their body. And if you have that and they're carrying that in their body. So imagine the cells have a vibration. Imagine the vibration of trauma. And for me, it can either be really heightened or it can be really low. So you can have that really depressed state, I guess, or that really manic state. So we've got that person with that water. So what we want to do is we want to stabilize that. So when we've got someone like that, they're going to be tight, they're going to be constricted, they're going to have some darkness in their energy. Like if a full moon can make our ocean go up and down, what's it doing to our body? I know when I did social work, I worked with really distressed kids, teenagers. And every full moon I would double my staff, because I had 3 houses. I would double my staff because the kids would go crazy. It's real, it happens. And it's because it's affecting the fluid in our body. So again, in a colonic room, what does it mean? What does it mean? And what type of therapy are we offering this client? And I guess what I'm giving you the opportunity to think about is seeing the colonic as something a little bit more outside than just the physical. And affecting the frequency. We have, you would have all seen clients and they've done this like release, and then you see this look on their face and you felt an energy shift. All of you must have felt that at some point. And that's what I'm talking about. Yes, it's our vagal tone coming down. Yes, it's like all of that physical shift going on in there. But I also believe there's something else. I believe there's something else that we're offering this client in that moment. And you would have some people say, we've had a healing occur. Because that person is going to walk out and just feel different. They're going to look different. How many of you get them to go look at the mirror and look in their eyes before they leave? Because their eyes will change in that hour, yeah? And these changes also can be subtle. And if you're not tuned in as a therapist, then what can happen is these changes can go by without noticing. But this is our point. Because if we can actually say to our client, did you feel that? Have you got that? They now can come into their body, potentially for the first time. And, this is what changed me, was because after one of my sessions, maybe the third, I never quite remember, but I actually went out into the car and the rear vision mirror, I could see. I got 5 minutes to go. Oh my gosh. I could see my body for the first time. So it was like I'd been a psychotherapist. I worked with heads for 20 years. I like it up here. It's pretty safe. I can make a story and I can make myself believe that story. Cellular memory, you can't argue with that. that comes up and that goes. So to be able to get someone to sink down in their body and feeling that, I think is pretty amazing. And I think that's some of the work that we can do. And as Eckhart Tolle says, it's about making space just beyond thought and then beyond senses. And it's at that moment that you can actually see that client and bring them in and go, what's going on there? And they can be having an emotional release where it's going to change their life. So therapeutic colonics can transcend physical and emotional healing to spiritual healing, offering a space to find self, God, universe, whatever words you want to put in there, within. However, concurrently bringing these aspects together as one in the now. So it's bringing a whole lot of areas together right at that moment. For me, that's powerful. I had a client from over 10 years ago just mentioned to message me. There was a Facebook post. She said, Sue, thank you so much. You changed my life in mind, body and spirit like you wouldn't believe, just from colonics. Now, we get this a lot. You would all get that. But it's about not underestimating that work. We don't know what's going on inside that body. We don't know what alchemy is actually being performed if we so set that intention and sit with that client and hold that space. I call it spirit in the belly. We've got lots of evidence about how water heals. We know that water, and we mightn't know exactly how, what the mechanics are, but we know that water can heal. And I also think then there's also another layer after that. And I guess that's what I'm trying to put words around and to come to understand. What we're doing is changing stories one belly at a time. I'm just going to finish up because I've got no time left. I was going to talk about how we work in the clinic. If anyone wanted to speak to me about how I work in the clinic with a session like this, I'm happy to do that. Just to talk quickly about a parasite cleanse, I've been working with a Dr. James Martin in the States. He has formed a parasite cleanse that he has structured into a polypeptide, so chains of amino acids. So what we're doing is we're taking this product, goes in and changes the inside of the colon wall, the structure. It's changing that structure up. It's paralysing the parasite, and then we're ready for removal. So what this is allowing not to happen is auto-intoxication. Because as you know, when we take herbs, even good herbs like wormwood or clover or whatever, they're killing that parasite, they're releasing gases, they're releasing poop, and they're releasing babies. If you have someone that is chronically ill, you're actually making them sicker because that's all being reabsorbed back throughout their body. So his product does not do this. And we've been working with this all this year, and it is really astounding. We're working on one called Blasto, which I don't know how big of a problem that is here, blastocystis, but in Australia that's a big problem, very hard to get rid of. They take very strong antibiotics for that. So if you also wanted to know more information about that, feel free. If you wanted to chase me up, it's sue@bottomsupcolonics.com.au, and I'm around for the weekend. Hopefully that was a little bit useful. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.